my name is Monica, and I'm with Temple of Geek, and I'm so excited to talk to you today about your new book, Summer Rental. And I'm also excited to talk to you about the fascinating career transitions that you've had. For our audience members who may not be too familiar with your books, can you please introduce yourselves and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Leonie Kocher. I write under the pen name Rektok Ross. I am a former trial attorney for over a decade, pivoted to a best-selling, I like to say best-selling, award-winning author, which is really amazing and took a lot of hard work to achieve. Also a screenwriter and now a producer.
That is so exciting. I read that your previous young adult book, Ski Weekend, was loosely based on some events that you read about as a child. Can you tell us a little bit about Summer Rental and what your inspiration for that book was?
Yeah, absolutely. So summer rental is actually really personal to me. I mean, not that ski weekend isn't, that is as well, but on a different level. So I feel like most women relate to this, which is kind of sad. But, I went through the experience in high school where I was kind of isolated for a while from my very best friend. So, you hear about bullying, and it's not that it's good in any scenario, but you don't often hear about it coming from your own friends. And I feel like I went through that, and it was incredibly traumatic that to have your entire support system like kind of disappear. The people you really trusted the most are now no longer your friends. And it was really traumatic for me going through it. But obviously as an adult, I've like gotten through it and now I'm kind of living my life. But I have stepchildren and I saw them go through, which is insane to me. I have two girls, a boy too, but it didn't happen to him. I saw them go through the exact same thing that I went through. They're kind of like group of friends turned on them. One happened in high school and one happened in college. And it really made me really think hard about, women just, what we do to each other, the harm we do to each other. And just, I think if there was more of an open dialogue about it and about, bullying and the way it happens in toxic friendships, I really wanted to write a book that kind of got to the heart of that and really explored it and kind of opened the conversation, because I feel like we don't talk about it enough. And there was not a lot I could do as a mom. It was a little paralyzing. Like I could give them advice, but I couldn't like talk to their friends, like the other girls, and say, you're devastating my child. Like this, I mean, they didn't sleep, they didn't eat. It was awful to watch them go through it. And there's not a lot you can do. So for me, this was kind of like taking back the power and be able to do it and hopefully help, not just other girls, but also women, because it doesn't, unfortunately, it doesn't stop at an age. I mean, you see it. I have adult friends that are going through it. And so I just want to write a book about that, but to do it in a really fun way. So it's like a murder mystery. It's very like reminiscent of the 80s and 90s movies I grew up on, like Scream and I Know You Did Last Summer. And there's been a resurgence of that as well. So I've always wanted to do like a fun murder mystery slasher, like a revenge thriller, but to have it encapsulated in this like really deep message that is important to me, as a woman, now as a mom, and for the future generations as well, to really talk about this and really examine it, because I deeply feel if there was more conversation and if we really saw what it does to people, you don't have to be friends with everyone. I'm not saying that, but like you can be kind. There's a way to handle situations that still, leave people, not in this devastated, horrible situation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that that is such an important conversation to have. And I'm excited to see this from a fun kind of like reading it in a book versus having to like live it, right? But also
Yes,
like
yes.
have this way to see like, oh, maybe that wasn't so nice of me, or maybe this is not a friendship that I want to like keep having anymore, or something like that. So
100%. I feel like this is a fun and accessible way to do it. And the really funny thing is like, it's so interesting as an author, like you put it out there and you hope people get it. And a lot of people are really resonating with it, because I do feel like it's sadly kind of universal experience. But I have had some people that some of the comments have been so funny where they're like, oh, these girls are so mean. I don't think these are good role models. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point. Like, welcome to this is what's really happening to our kids. And, also us as adults, like this is real. I mean, people, I don't think the characters in Summer Rental are any meaner than what I've personally witnessed myself and with, my girls and hearing stories as well. So I thought that was kind of funny. I'm like, I don't know, maybe you were very blessed and lucky this didn't happen or you didn't see it, but like, no, girls actually are, and women can actually be this mean.
And when it comes to the characters in Summer Rental, what is something you hope that readers understand about these characters that you've created?
Yeah, I think it's hard to do this without giving anything away, but
Right.
I think what I really wanted people to see was that these girls, as terrible and mean as they are, I think they really also don't actually understand the impact of what they are doing. Like they're just trying to be fun and popular and have parties or whatever, and they're just being them, and they're not actually seeing that the things they're doing are very damaging. And in this book, it takes hopefully not a real world like this doesn't happen in the real world where you're a mean girl and then people come back and kill you or whatever, but it definitely comes to roost in this book. And I think the fact that they're not even intentionally trying to be this mean, it's just how they are and who they are, and they're just not thinking of other people and what they're doing. And I think that's what I wanted people to understand. Like that's what I experienced, that's what I saw my daughter's experience. It's not like their friends or my friends. I don't think anyone intentionally thought I'm going to scar this person for life or like make their lives a living hell. They were just doing what they thought, what felt good to them or made sense to them without actually being able to see the consequences. And that's what I really wanted people to get from this book.
Which is a very teenager thing, right? You just don't understand the impact of
What you're doing. And even adult women too. I think, we just do what feels good in the time or what feels right in the time. I don't think we don't have to see the impact, or maybe we don't want to see it. And I think this is what I wanted to do the book. Like I wanted to open people's eyes to there's really serious damage that you're doing. And if you could just take a step back, like it's not that hard to be kind. If you don't like someone, you don't have to be their friend, but you also don't have to torture them. Like there's other ways to go about it.
And I know we can't talk spoilers or anything like that. We don't want to ruin anything. But are there moments in the book that you're really proud of and that you were really excited for the audience to read?
Yeah, so there's a few. So the first one is, and I love this, absolutely makes my day. I love my readers, and when they send me DMs or emails about this, I did drop some Easter eggs. And I'm like cackling to myself as I'm like typing in the book, but some little nuggets for people who have read Ski Weekend, which was my debut thriller. These books all take place in the same universe, different characters that at some point may be intertwining. But I loved like putting in little nuggets like that. I thought that was really fun. And I kind of wanted to reward the people who've been with me since the first book. And I knew they get a kick out of it, and they have. So that, and then the other thing, I'm, an 80s, 90s baby, and I grew up on, I love horror. Probably my absolute favorite is a slasher, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream. Like this is like my bread and butter. It's what I live for. And being able to introduce kind of the next generation, either, having that nostalgia vibe for people who are like me, grew up with it, and letting them kind of dive back into it. And then also for the new generation, exposing them to this. I loved putting that in the book. I loved putting like little references to, I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream, and even, Aliens is not a slasher, but it's still that same kind of like family of the 80s, 90s horror. Nightmare on Elm Street. I loved putting all of those little things in there for people to kind of, either the new people to say, oh my God, I want to now watch this because I heard about it in the book, or, Silence of the Lambs, I got the reference in the book. Now I want to read that book, or I want to watch that movie. And then kind of rewarding the people like me, the older people that grew up on it, and being like, oh my God, I remember that, from Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer. I think that for me was so fun to be able to like dive into this world of slashers, and just something I loved and embraced so much, to be able to introduce that to people.
That's so awesome. And then who would you say is your target audience for this? Obviously, people who love slashers and things like that, but who do you think would really enjoy this?
Yeah, it's funny because my husband's amazing, and he's been, kind of my sounding board for this, and he hates horror, which is funny because like I love horror, and we've talked a lot about it. He kind of heard the first drafts and everything, and he was like, I actually love this book, which is surprising to me. He's like, this is a great kind of like intro book, or like a gateway drug, if you will, to horror. So I really think it's a great book for anyone who maybe doesn't know that they like horror or that they like thrillers and kind of wants to dip their feet into it. I think this is a perfect book for that. I think it's has a lot of psychological thriller to it as well. There's not a ton of gore, a little bit at the end, but not a lot. I think there's not a lot of torture or anything like that. Like it's a pretty light book for the horror world. So I definitely think anyone who just wants to try it and see, or maybe even a psychological thriller, I think perfect for that. People who like Frida McFadden, Lucy Foley, Natasha Preston, like it's great for thrillers, and it's also great for, again, the 80s and 90s people who grew up with Christopher Pike, R.L. Stein, L.J. Smith. They are loving this book, which is so fun because those are like my idols. So for people to recognize that and to be able to say, oh my God, this reminds me of Christopher Pike, this reminds me of R.L. Stein, is so incredibly flattering. And I think this is a perfect book. Like they're really, really loving it and getting it. And then I would say I've had a couple of moms, say, what would be a good book about, the themes of bullying or, friendships, finding the right friends. That's another conversation I've had with my girls, finding the right friends. You don't have to be in the popular crowd or be with the cool kids. Like you want to find people that are going to be there for you. That's what a friend really is. And I think starting those conversations, but doing it, like you said, in a way that's, a little more accessible, like a Netflix binge book, as opposed to like sitting down and, reading a nonfiction book on how to have friends or whatever. A lot of moms, I think, have found that this is a great book. And people have been recommending it to moms. Like, I'm in a lot of reader groups that moms that are looking for books like this for confidence and friendship in younger women. And then also, I think older women too. Like I went through an incident in my 30s working at my law firm where there was some weird dynamics going on. And I kind of felt like I was a little bit ousted for reasons. I mean, it resolved itself, which was great. But I think anyone who's doing that in the workplace, there's just weird dynamics that happen sometimes in workplace as well. And I think this is a really great book for that as well. If there's any kind of like toxic friendships, kind of like female bullying going on even in a workplace situation, I think this is a great book for that. And really also just anyone, the last category, anyone who just wants, not everyone's getting that deep with this book. Some people are just like, this was super fun and I loved reading it by the pool. So it works on that level as well. I mean, it's summer. Anyone who wants a fun summer thriller, this is a great book for that too, a page turner.
Awesome. And then you mentioned your workplace and everything. I really want to ask you about your really fascinating transition. You were a lawyer and now you're an award-winning and best-selling author, a screenwriter, and a producer, all of which sound like dream come trues. Can you speak to what the transition from one career to the other has been like?
Yeah, it was very difficult, actually. So I think I knew when I started working, I really enjoyed being a lawyer. There's a lot of amazing things about it. I definitely encourage people, if that's their career path, to go for it. I had a lot of wonderful experiences. However, I realized probably year 3 or 4 in that there was something missing in my life personally. I've always loved books. I've always loved reading. I've always loved movies, filmmaking. And I think I started to realize, like, as much as I like my job, and I really liked my job, I was in a really comfortable place. Other than that one little thing, but we worked through it. I was really happy, and I loved the people I worked with at a really supportive firm. And it was kind of hard because everything was going so well career-wise, but I just knew in my gut that I was missing something, and it wasn't really what I was here to do, what I was put on this planet to do, or my purpose. And so I started taking classes at night. I went to, at the time I was living in Dallas. So I went to SMU. I started taking writing classes just to see, like, can I do this? Like, what is it to be a writer? How does the craft work? I loved it. I had so much fun doing it. And then I started to kind of take baby steps. Like, how would I pivot this? And the first thing I did was I started to go on flex time. So I kind of like decreased my hours at my firm, and then I would spend, the weekends writing. And then I think when I really realized, like, I have to do this, is what I really want to do, but I was really scared to do it for a lot of reasons. Like my identity had been tied to, I think a lot of people relate to this. A lot of people, when we talk about career transition, identity is a huge thing. If you've been doing something for years and years and years, and you're really good at it, and the paycheck's coming, and you don't hate what you're doing, it's really hard to pivot and say, okay, I'm going to do something totally different, because we don't really like change as human beings. And it's a really big change. And there's a lot of uncertainty, especially financially. So I actually met with a career coach So someone who specializes in like transition, so switching careers. And she was able to work, we did about 6 months of coaching while I was still working at the law firm and writing on my weekends. And she was really able to help me work through some of the fears that I had. It was a really amazing experience. There was a lot of like little things I learned, but probably the most important takeaway that she taught me is, nothing's set in stone. So if you do make this, big career transition and you wind up hating it, that was my big fear. Like, what if I hate it? Then I burn all these bridges. I worked so hard to be a lawyer. And she kind of taught me through it, like, well, couldn't you go back to being a lawyer? Like the people that liked you and enjoyed working with you, wouldn't they embrace you to come back? And I was like, yeah, they would. And I started talking to them like little by little, I had little conversations, and they were all really supportive and were like, yeah, if you don't like it, you want to come back, come back. And I think those exercises and working with her for a few months got me to really have the confidence to say, okay, I'm going to do it. And then I did it.
And I really love how you touched on that point of identity. Like, I think as women, sometimes we pigeonhole ourselves to one thing, like, oh, we're just,
Yes,
oh, we're just a wife, oh, we're just a lawyer, we're just this one thing. But I think it's
yeah,
great when you see that you can be so many things and so many things at the
100%.
same time.
100%. And I will say I've been really lucky that I'm not sure if it's COVID or what's happened, but you'll see like we live in such an interesting age right now as far as just like being an entrepreneur and being a creator. And you're seeing people all that's like on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. And we have so much ability now to get out there, for an author, especially to be able to put your books up, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, get into local indie bookstores. You don't necessarily have to answer to anyone anymore. You can go directly to there's no gatekeepers anymore, at least in publishing. I mean, people like to pretend that there are, but the truth is there aren't. You can go directly to your readers, you can directly to your customers and have one-on-one, not only does your book get published, so you don't need someone to say, no, I'm not going to publish this, but through social media, you can go one-on-one right to your people and you can reach them. And I think that's something amazing. And it's not just publishing. I mean, you're seeing it in everything. Women entrepreneurs all over the board, creators, YouTube, everything. We live in such an incredible time that I feel like if you were thinking that you're not happy with what you're doing, like there's no reason I think anymore to be doing that. Like there's so much opportunity and so many doors open. We are so lucky to be living in the era we're living in right now.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. I have two last questions for you. One is, will you be doing any signings or appearances soon? And the second is, do you have any favorite books that just really speak to you?
Yes. So the answer to the first one is yes, I will be at Comic Con. So it'll be my second year of the panel. I'm very, very excited. I went last year and I loved it. I went with the producers of Ski Weekend. So my first thriller is actually being adapted right now into a movie. That was super fun. This time I'm going with other female authors that I love, and I'm really excited to be in a panel with them. So I will be there. I will be signing. I'll be meeting people. And then I'll also be at a festival in Tampa called YA by the Bay. It's the inaugural, YA Florida Festival, YA Young Adult. I believe some really interesting, cool people will be there, other authors. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited just to meet and connect with readers, especially young readers. And then as far as books, so I have a book club and we've been doing a lot of like really, we pick a different book every single month. It's called The Book Nook by Rektok. We do a different book every single month. And I think one of the books that I really loved, and I was kind of surprised I loved it because I'm not a big memoir person, but it was Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights. And I thought it was, as someone who is trying to get into filmmaking, I'm an executive producer on Ski Weekend and working on the screenplay. That's kind of like my first, well, it's not totally true. I worked at Miramax for a little bit, but my first, like with my own work, kind of getting into filmmaking. And I think his book was incredibly inspirational to kind of watch the path he's walked on and how he's had so many ups and downs in his career. And it lets you really kind of see the long scope for filmmaking, especially, but also just careers in general, that there is no overnight success. We only see it when someone gets here. We don't see everything below that they did to get all the way up to the top. And that was, I think for me, his book really hit home. So that was an amazing read. I would recommend to anyone who, creative entrepreneur doing their own thing, incredibly inspiring. As far as thrillers, because I write thrillers and I love a good thriller. Christopher Pike will always be my number one main guy. I think my dream would be to meet him, but I don't think that'll ever happen because he's a famous recluse. But his book, Remember Me, was a book I read in my childhood and has stuck with me for my entire life and has made me want to be a writer. So I would say that one for sure. And then more recently, Gillian Flynn. I love everything that she does, but especially Dark Places was just another serial killer. Well, I guess he's an axe murderer, but amazing. And it's funny because there's a whole conversation in Summer Rental about this, the difference between the two, but amazing, amazing read, Dark Places.
I love that so much of Summer Rental is like a part of you. Like there's so much in you in Summer Rental that's very
Yeah,
well. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I really appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll see you at San Diego Comic Con.
I would love to see you. That would be amazing. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. It's super fun.